The 97 NBA Finals between the Bulls and the Jazz. It's a good thing Big Cat was a kid, Steve, because these were the days of the unders. Chicago, the 3-2 lead at home, and Michael Jordan to Steve Kerr, jumper good. 88-86 was the lead. They got the stop they needed and would win their fifth of their sixth NBA titles. Kerr, a part of the second Bulls three-peat before winning two more as a player with the Spurs, three so far as coach of the Warriors. The list of people to win three championships as both a player and a coach is a list of one. That list is Steve Kerr. That's the tweet, as they say. And we welcome him back to the show now live. Steve Kerr, kind enough to be with us. And Steve, as these memories are dusted off, you lived them. What are the memories and the emotions, I guess, more specifically, that come flooding back?
I just think, how much fun it was to be a part of, how great NBA basketball was in the 90s, how different it was then to now, and how dominant Michael was, not just physically, but spiritually, the hold he had over the entire league, over everybody. It was just dramatic, and I think that's the hardest thing for the young players who didn't see him play. They can see the highlights, but they can't feel his dominance, and that's what I'm hoping this documentary really shows.
And it's clear that the appetite for this, it's 10 episodes, and people are like, give me 50. You know what I mean? Like, they'll devour the content about you guys, and I think the younger folks are obsessed with finding out as much as they can. But having lived it, Steve, what's the thing that we'll never truly grasp about what it was like to be in the inside of that absolute juggernaut?
I think just how difficult it was. Everybody knows how great Michael was, and he went 6-0 in the finals. And you look back and you probably just assume he was so dominant that it was easy. It was not easy. It wasn't easy for him or for anybody. And he made the difficult look easy because of his dominance, but he had to dig so deep year after year, and it took so much out of him. But it was just an incredible thing to be a part of, and just amazing to look back and think, man, I was part of that team, and to live that experience is pretty incredible.
And what's probably hard for people to understand, whether it's the Krause dynamic or just what you're describing, how difficult it is. Like, winning's hard, but you guys were winning, and yet it's almost like you become your own enemy. Why does that become so? And maybe to a degree it happened with the Warriors, where like the winning, you devour yourselves. Why is that so hard, Steve?
I think just because of a number of things. Your opponents are gunning for you year after year, so they're not only getting better, they're building their roster for you. They're thinking about you every waking moment. And as you go and as you win, the motivation, the energy that it takes, it just gets more and more difficult. And so for every team, whether it was the Bulls or the Warriors or the Heat, the Lakers and Celtics in the 80s, you win 2-3 championships, and it just gets more and more difficult because it's exhausting, and every other team is just coming at you every day.
I am fascinated, Steve, by the notion of fame and what it was then, because you see it. You all are the Beatles wherever you go. Then and now, right? Because now it feels like it's different. How do you compare fame for this Bulls team and then fame as it exists in 2020?
I think there was almost a mystical quality to a famous team or an athlete like Michael back then. Nothing was left to the imagination now, or nothing is left to the imagination now. Back then, you could get away from it as an athlete, as a player, as anybody in the public eye. When the camera wasn't on you, you could escape it. But today, with social media, with people constantly seeing every aspect of your life, you look at Steph Curry, he's a great example of someone whose every movement is analyzed and judged and criticized. So I think back then there was a little more freedom that came with fame. You could escape it. And now it just seems like it's impossible to do so.
I'm trying to picture Rodman in the age of social media. How would that have gone?
Yeah, a lot of followers for sure.
Yeah, a lot of followers, but man, like Jordan got a laugh about the circus. There was a laugh about the circus there, but Rodman was his own circus in an area where there was still places, Steve, where it felt like you could kind of get away. I mean, next week follows on him. What would people be surprised about this guy, about like what he was as a worker or a teammate, something that they wouldn't necessarily get?
I think just how shy and quiet Dennis was, the real Dennis. You know, behind the scenes, he liked listening to Pearl Jam. He liked hanging out with his teammates. He liked lifting weights, and he rarely said a word in practice. But when he got in front of the crowd, like you see in some of these images,
yeah,
you know, he became a different person. But genuinely, he was just a good dude. Guys really liked to hang out with him, and he was pretty unassuming, actually.
You've lived a hell of a professional life. If there's a singular moment or just anecdote of how the time you spent with Jordan as a Bull, how it has best served you as you transition, and I should obviously say with Phil, how it's best served you in this sort of second act.
Well, the first thing that I would say is that if I hadn't been on those Bulls teams, none of the rest of my career would have happened. And I mean that. I wouldn't have become a coach of the Golden State Warriors if I hadn't had that experience with the Bulls. So I feel like, you know, every time I see Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen or Phil Jackson, I think back to that experience, and it kind of paved the way for the rest of my career, both as a player and a broadcaster and as a coach. So I know how fortunate I was to be part of that whole run, just like all of us do. That was a great group of guys, very mature group, and we all knew exactly how lucky we were, and we made the most of it.
And obviously, it's a third act. I would never gloss over the second act as a broadcaster, because you were quite capable there as well. But wait, listen, it's always a pleasure to catch up. And obviously, we're talking about the past, and the current state of things is something we want to talk about, and will a little bit later in the week, Steve. So thanks so much. We look forward to our conversation about things at the moment, and appreciate you joining us. All right.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
When we continue, first look at episode 3 of The Last Dance.
For special, focused on the quarterbacks, an intriguing group in this year's draft class. It starts with these 4. Heisman winner Joe Burrow at the top of most boards, followed by Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love. But as we'll see over the next hour, maybe not in that order. A lot on tap in the next 60 minutes. One of the most intriguing quarterback prospects, Jordan Love, will join us live. Find out what he's been working on to improve his draft stock. Nick Saban releases an ESPN exclusive breakdown of Joe Burrow's championship performance against Clemson. And Tua Tagovailoa's quarterback coach Trent Dilfer checks in live to take you inside Tua's latest rehab and what he saw while running Tua's pro day last week. It is great to have everybody on board. I'm Susie Culver, sharing their knowledge for the next hour. Chris Mortensen, Mel Kiper Jr., Dan Orlovsky, and our guest analyst, ESPN alum and former NFL scout, Daniel Jeremiah. Let's start there. Mel, why is there such a strong consensus for the reigning Heisman winner?
You know, you look for safe picks, Suze. You think about guys who made it easy for the team picking number 1, the Bengals. Joe Burrow did that. There was no game where you left that contest saying, boy, I wonder if there should be somebody else ahead of Joe. Never had that. He was over 71% completion percentage in every game except one. That was a national championship game against Clemson, where he was at 63-3 with 5 touchdowns and 0 picks, coming through after adjusting after that struggle early to have a heck of a game. You think about the 6 games, he was at 79% or better. The improvement from last year to this year was staggering. Obviously, Joe Brady had something to do with that, but the improvement of those receivers led by Justin Jefferson and Chase had a lot to do with his success. But I think if he's a bust, Daniel, then we should all retire.
I'm with you, Mel. I just look at quarterbacks and I try and break it down into 4 big things, and that is accuracy, decision-making, poise, and then playmaking ability. And Joe Burrow, he's off the charts in every single area. You mentioned not finding bad games. It's hard to find bad drives and a bad series of plays with Joe Burrow this year. Now, the one thing he does not have that you traditionally see with that first overall pick, Mel, he doesn't have a huge arm. I got a chance to go out there and watch him work out with Sam Darnold and Josh Allen, and his arm is definitely not at the Josh Allen level. And I would say Sam Darnold's even a little bit stronger. But that's when you nitpick him. He can do everything else. He does it at a very high level.
Look, so nobody's going to argue that Burrow had the greatest season ever by a college quarterback. A lot of that credit goes to Joe Brady, who wasn't there in 2018. So, Dan, can Zach Taylor help Burrow duplicate that success? I mean, the system, the weapons, NFL defenses are different. How does that work?
Yeah, Zach Taylor absolutely can. Zach Taylor's had a really good up-and-coming career.